The New South Wales government just announced that they're going to give almost $800 million to first home buyers to get into their own property. I'm going to tell you what this means then for the property market and what you should expect to come as a result of this. My name's Adam Panisi. I do these videos to try and help you guys buy property, get into property, and also into property development. So the news articles that have just come out in the last day have been all around the $800 million that the government has allocated towards the relief for stamp duty. So they're going to abolish stamp duty for first home buyers under $1.5 million for a $1.5 million property or less. So you don't have to pay stamp duty if you're buying a property that's up to $1.5 million. But what they're going to get you to do is pay a nominal fee. It's $400 plus 0.3% of the land, and that's paid per annum for another 10 years odd. So it's basically financing people into the property. This is $800 million. It's done by the state government, or it's been announced by the state government. It's due to come into effect on the 1st of July, I believe. So what that's going to mean then for property prices in New South Wales, it's going to mean that a lot more first home buyers are going to be able to afford more, or first home buyers are going to be able to afford to spend more on their property, which means that obviously there's going to be a surge of buyers that happens every time that there's some sort of incentive, especially with first home buyers, because they're a lot less sophisticated than the rest of the market. One would expect that if you're buying a second or third home, that you're going to have a bit more knowledge and be a bit more astute about what you're paying for the property, where you're buying it, and you're probably going to be spending a little bit more money on your second and third home, among other things. So this is just going to mean that it's going to put more pressure on price demand, or demand in the market for first home buyers up to that price point. So we've seen previously with JobKeeper, first home buyers grants, etc., that every time a new scheme comes out, it means property prices increase. It's fairly substantial because it is only a state policy that they've introduced. It's not a federal, where the Labor government has also, they're going to introduce the 30% as part of 30% deposit as part of the budget, which hasn't come into play yet. But if that comes into play as well, then obviously that's just going to accelerate the property market even more. So my crystal ball is that Sydney in particular areas has an oversupply, so there's more sellers than there are buyers, so the supply demand ratio is low. You've also got affordability issues in some pockets of Sydney. So the market has cooled. Now Sydney, because it has the most value of property in the entirety of Australia, and between Sydney and Melbourne there's something like 75% of the wealth in property in the entirety of Australia in those two capital cities. So the media is really hyped about the negativity, or the slump in property prices and what's to come. So there's a lot of buyers sitting on the sideline waiting for the market to come off, which it may have a little bit more pain left to go, and a lot of it's driven around market sentiment, but also that affordability. People just can't afford to get into a market, and that's not the same with all markets. If you've got if your supply demand ratio is out of alignment, out of whack, as in if there's more buyers than sellers, then they're going to push the price up. But providing those buyers have the finance or have the cash to actually buy the property. So it's going to be different even in different parts of Sydney. The market overall is cooling, yes, but there's still markets within that Sydney metro region that are still going gangbusters. And from my feedback from students, people I talk to down in that area, the market is still running pretty hot in exclusive suburbs. So I don't think that the market's going to be a complete bloodbath in the next 12 or 24 months. I think the best buying opportunities for Sydney is probably going to be in the next 12 months. It may be cut short, or it might go a bit longer. At the moment, I would be getting educated if you're not already. So really knuckling down and getting educated on what strategy you want to do. So pinpoint, what do you want to do? Do you just want to buy your own home, or do you want to buy an investment property? Or do you want to make hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars doing something like property development? So work out what it is that you want, set your goal, set it right in the first place, and then become an area expert in an area that you're wanting to buy into. So if you're local to Sydney, and I know people spruik about buying interstate where the market is booming and all of that stuff, property's still bricks and mortar. If you're buying in your backyard, especially with Sydney's prices, the way that they have performed over time, it's a lot more of a safe, reliable market. Sure, there might be other areas that have surpassed in terms of growth, but buying in your local backyard, whether it's your own home or an investment property, if you know that area, know that market really well, and become an area expert, you can physically touch, feel, all that stuff, be on the ground. It does make it easier, and I actually teach how to buy properties, 20, 30% under market value or more. And really, in my experience, the way I've been able to do that hasn't been interstate where I've had to catch flights and things. It's actually been on the ground in areas that I've become familiar with. Now, I'm able to replicate that now after some experience. I can do that interstate. I know what to look for, but I still like to be on the ground. If you're making, one of the biggest investment decisions of your life, you might get lucky and you might have seen people buy in certain pockets and things like that, but you're only going to own one property within an entire marketplace. So just because the market is performing at 20%, in per annum, your one property may perform better than that, or it may perform worse than that. If you're buying blindfolded somewhere that you don't know the market, well then chances are it's probably going to perform worse than the overall market. So just think about, even if the market stays flat in Sydney for the next 12 months, which it may do, or it may come off a little bit more, get geared up to buy a property, because the property market in Sydney now is going to boom off the back of this first home buyer grant, which around stamp duty, which the government has announced. So there's going to be, an uptake in first home buyers wanting to get into the market, and especially now that the market has cooled, they'll be even more eager to. So they're going to push prices up. Areas that are in undersupply are going to be pushed up with pricing. Just because the interest rates are rising, yes, it's going to price some people out of the market. But if you're in the right areas where people don't necessarily need to stretch themselves all the way to 80, 90% loan to value ratios, if you're in more affluent areas where people are buying their second home and their loan to value ratio is 50%, or people are coming in and paying cash for stuff where they don't need a mortgage, those areas aren't going to be affected that much. And take into account previous interest rate rises. I'm just going to take the last interest rate rise that we had, which was, in the 2000 lead up to 2007-8, we had multiple interest rate rises. Look at what the property market did over that time, over that period. Interest rates went up, property market absolutely boomed. So affordability wasn't at the same level that it was. There's different factors to take into account. I don't believe history repeats itself. You can only look at history for clues as to what might happen. So history is always different. Our market cycles are a lot shorter than what they were. So I think that we're going to be in for a period of flatlining, maybe a bit of a decline. If people have overpaid for particular properties, sure, that's going to, they're going to take a 10, 20, 30% haircut on those. But, people are paying silly money for stuff in the last 18 months. And you get people, the crowd, they get wrapped up in this whole FOMO, fear of missing out. And, you've got to get into the property market. But when the property market comes off, nobody wants to buy property. Nobody wants to buy crypto at the moment. Nobody's buying shares, or if you are, who knows what the share market's going to continue to do. So same thing with property, that investor sentiment has really pulled back, which is all the demand in the market. Once the market starts moving again, and it is going to in areas where there's undersupply and there's huge demand, so you only just need to look around in pockets and become familiar with those areas. You can look at statistics, that's going to shortcut it quicker than being on the ground. But even just as a very high level look, go on realestate.com and have a look at how many properties are for sale in a particular suburb, and are they under contract or are they sitting around. That's a pretty easy telltale sign as to how a market's performing, and it only takes you to make a few phone calls to agents or a few inquiries to realize what market that's in. So, during a booming market, you see all the properties on realestate.com or Domain, they're all under contract. They hit the market, they're under contract straight away. So the market's booming, and if you got in early enough, then sure, you rode that wave. But my preference has been, and my experience is, I always buy in markets like we're leading into or like we're in at the moment. So I'm knuckling down, and we're going to go buy some quite substantial properties over the next 12 months because I believe it's going to come back off the back of undersupply and off the back of demand and the money flowing through the economy. And the government in New South Wales is just the start of, and other things which are coming into play, it's just the start of what's to come over the term, over the next few years at least. So there's going to be a lot of money flowing in the air into the economy, and that inflation is only going to flow back into property. So buy in the next 12 months is my prediction, my opinion based on experience. You just got to be mindful of the area you're buying in. Make sure you pick a good pocket, a good property, and have a strategy in place so that if the market, doesn't move in the next few years like we expect it to, if it does stay flat in your area, build some instant equity into that by buying well and then adding value. Hope that's really helped. Let me know if you want to find out any more details of anything I've spoken about today. And if you want to check out my advanced training program, I cover things like market updates, strategies on developing properties, and that can just be making money just by buying property or even just finding properties for other people and then passing them on. So this is a program which I put together over the last 12 years. You do have to pay for it, but I do have some exclusive free training as well. So register for the free training. There will be a link in the comments below. Register for that. It will really open up your eyes to what's possible, and you just getting started and doing active strategies, buying in well-located areas and making a huge amount of money from property, be able to replace your income, whatever it is that you desire. Have a great one. We'll chat to you soon.